Barack Obama has officially begun his second presidential term after being sworn in at the White House. Later, on Monday, he will spell out his vision for the next 4 years in his inaugural address. But he's being criticized for failing to keep old promises to end the wars the nation's involved in, to cut the U.S. deficit, and to shut down the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center. But as RT's Ganesh Chikana reports, there are even more pledges he's not addressed.
It's generally thought that a second term sets a U.S. president free, unlocks those handcuffs that kept them from doing great things in their first term because they had to think about getting reelected all the time. In the last 4 years, we heard many times President Obama's hands are tied on this issue or that issue. Suppose this election has untied his hands. We don't have a crystal ball to tell you what he's going to do with those free presidential hands, but we may already see signs of what is to come. President Obama steps into his second term carrying a heavy load of promises. Along with the pledges comes the threat of another devastating war in the Middle East. For 4 years, President Obama, pushed to a great extent by Israel, has threatened war with Iran.
I will take no options off the table, and I mean what I say. Please have a seat.
Some believe the appointment of Chuck Hagel as defense secretary, who's known to have been against the strike on Iran, may be a sign that the new Obama administration will be less warmongering towards Iran. But two of the country's leading Middle East experts aren't convinced.
I would bet a certain amount of money we will hear the words "all options are on the table" come out of his mouth.
In addition to the Hagel appointment, we have the appointment of John Brennan at the CIA, who I think is someone who the Israelis are just fine with, who will continue many of the covert programs, of course, our drone program, but many of the covert programs that would be under his authority at the CIA, that will be very much to Israel's liking, that will serve to undermine any attempts or any possibilities for a real rapprochement or coming to terms with the Islamic Republic of Iran.
John Brennan has been in charge of President Obama's targeted assassinations program. His appointment puts the notorious war on terror in a different perspective and shows that it's far from over.
They want wars that will not redound against them at home politically. So they don't want any more body bags. They don't want any more American troops killed, to the extent they want to prevent that. They want to have all the soldiers sitting in Alexandria, Virginia, or Los Angeles or whatever, and running the drones that are killing people, whether it's Afghanistan or Yemen or Iran or, wherever else.
However, over the next 4 years, the administration's reach will extend far beyond the Middle East, as it is set to continue its pivot to Asia, as well as building a missile shield provocatively close to Russia's borders. Last year, in a hot mic moment, President Obama told Russia's Dmitry Medvedev that in his second term, he'd be more flexible to discuss Moscow's concerns.
Yeah, and after my election, I have more flexibility. Yeah, I understand.
But it could turn out to be flexibility in words only, rather than actions.
If in the end, Russia is still adamantly opposed to it, still sees it as a threat, and we're just going to have to go ahead and do it anyway.
While President Obama may have more control over foreign policy, domestically there is a greater chance of his agenda getting bogged down in Congress, like gun control.
The executive orders are useless, and legislative proposals, I suspect, will not pass.
In this country, I don't think it's in the offing anywhere in the near future, because we are a culture that is very deeply in love with our guns.
In the last 4 years, Congress more than once attempted to sabotage the president on key economic issues, including reaching a last-minute deal as the country teetered on the edge of fiscal cliff.
Presidents who have trouble with Congress like to do international things because they have to worry about Congress much less.
The president's actions so far have shown little possibility that in the next 4 years he will be any more flexible on major foreign policy issues. As far as his domestic agenda, many doubt whether his never-ending battle with Congress will allow him to move significantly beyond inspiring speeches. In Washington, I'm Ganesh Chikana.
With Obama given a second chance at change, anti-war activist John Glazer says there won't be any noticeable shift in the president's policies.
As is typical with politicians, what they say is very different from what they do. There's a broad bipartisan consensus on some of the most terrible national security issues that affect us on the domestic front. I mean, for example, warrantless wiretapping. This is a policy that was widely criticized when the Bush administration was in power. And now the Obama administration has, uniformly embraced it. The Obama administration has aggressively refused to allow any checks and balances, and has even refused congressional requests to disclose how many Americans have been spied on. So things like that, are really troubling, and I don't think he's going to get as much pushback from Congress as one might hope. In the foreign policy realm, Obama has unfortunately continued much of his predecessors' excesses and recklessness. We will see a continuation of foreign policy of extreme interventionism, getting involved in every corner of the planet, regardless of the consequences.